All right. Well, we're now recording and we have everybody present. And I'd like to introduce Cherie Carter-Scott, who's agreed to speak with us tonight. And thank you very, very much, Cherie. Yenny, who has phoned in because she's got email and not so much email, but computer problems. So she's asked me to take over. I'm going to get Cherie to introduce herself because she'll do that much more efficiently than me. The thing I would like to say before we start, if anyone wants CCEUs, please send me an email in the chat box telling me to do that and give me your full name. So I'm now going to not waste any more time and hand over to you, Cherie. And thank you very, very much for being with us.
Well, thank you, Shirley. And let's see, I'm going to try my earphones here, and Shirley, and you can let me know if this is acceptable for audio. Can you hear me now, or is that a problem? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Okay, so let's proceed. I've been coaching for 42 years and training coaches for about the same amount of time. First started in the States. There's a noise in the background that I'm hearing.
I'm just
I hear
going to
that
mute
too, Cherie.
Right. Can you hear it also?
everybody.
I can hear it also.
Okay, perfect. So there we go. So I started coaching in San Francisco, California, October 15th, 1974. And shortly thereafter, my client said, "Can you teach me how to do what you're doing?" And I didn't really know if I could or I couldn't, but I said, "Let me give it my best shot." So we started analyzing what I was doing. And lo and behold, we came up with a training program and started teaching people how to do that individually in 74 and then in our first group in 1975. So I am passionate about coaching. It's really the purpose of my life. And I've been doing it all these years, first in the States, and then in 88 we opened up in Europe. And we did our first coach training in Holland in 1990. And then we came to Asia 6 years ago in 2010. And Webster University, Thailand, invited us to teach management, leadership, and coaching. And so we had courses for the both undergraduate and graduate level here in Bangkok and Hua Hin. And right now we have 6 different locations worldwide where we teach both the ACTP and the ACSTH. So that's about enough of me. I've written a bunch of books and a variety of other things, and we can talk about those later. But let's get right on to the art of not knowing, because I think it's a really, really important fundamental aspect of the coaching experience. And I'm going to go through the presentation as Shirley advised, and then afterwards we're going to have time for questions and answers and comments and thoughts, things like that afterwards. So we'll proceed. So being a really effective coach, and truly in the ICF sense of being a truly effective coach, you must give up knowing the answers for other people. You can do that as a consultant. You can do that as a mentor. You can do that in a lot of different professions, but not in the coaching profession. And I think it's one of the hardest things that people have to give up. And we're going to explore that together, why that's such a challenge for people. And it may or may not be a challenge for you. It may be a challenge for those people that you mentor or that you train or that you coach. But it's really, I have known since back in 74 that this is probably one of the biggest challenges in training coaches, is allowing someone to really unlearn what they spent so many years learning. So learning to unlearn means that you're moving into a new mindset, as you very well know, and that mindset is not knowing for the other person, not knowing for your client, not knowing what's best for them, not knowing what they should do. Now, I'll tell you a little story about myself, and then we can get back on track with the slides. I just wanted to ask, Lydia, do you have your microphone on? If you could mute it, it might help because there's a little background noise there. So if that would work for you, Lydia, great. Okay, so when I was 6 years old, I went to a Catholic girls' school, and a nun asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I was very naive and innocent when I was 6, and some of you have 6-year-old children. And I looked up at her because, you know, she was very tall and I was very short. And I looked up at her and I said, well, I'd like to be a priest. And she looked down at me and she said, no, you don't. And I said, yes, I do. And she said, no, you don't. We started this argument between the two of us of yes, you do and no, you don't. And at a certain point, I succumbed. And then I succumbed, it meant that I allowed her to be right, no more, and to tell me the way things were, which obviously I hadn't learned sufficiently yet. She let me know that I could become a nun and that was allowable, but priest was off limits. So 1 year later, my mother asked me when I was 7, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, I wasn't about to say priest because I was a fast learner. And I thought quickly, oh, what's second best? What should I want to become? Let's see. I said, I know, I want to be an actress. And my mother said, no, you don't. And I said, I don't. What should I want to become? She said, you should want to become a teacher. And I looked at her and I thought, a teacher? She said, because if your husband dies, you can support your children. Now that had some basic assumptions in the equation. Number 1, that I was going to get married. Number 2, that I was going to have children. And number 3, that if some calamity happened and he happened to pass, that I would have a fallback plan, which was being a teacher. As it turned out, my mother was actually right. So I did become a teacher, and I do teach, and I love to teach. But at that moment, at 7 years old, having gone through this experience 2 times and being told that my answers were wrong, I became an outer-centered person. And I became a person who actually looked to other people for their answers. And I did it very religiously. Like whenever I had to make a decision or a choice, anything significant in my life, or perceived to be significant, I would ask somebody else, what do you think I should do? Where do you think I should go to school? What do you think I should do with my life? What career should I go into? Should I marry this guy? Should I not marry him? Should I cut my hair? Should I become a vegetarian? Just about any decision, I would look to other people and take a kind of informal survey of what I should do. Now, this was something that I did pretty religiously because I figured I didn't want to give the wrong answers again, because I didn't like the feeling that happened when I gave the wrong answers of priest and actress. So I thought, I'll just ask other people and find out the right answer, and then I'll give that answer, because then I'll minimize the disruptive element, and I'll minimize the criticism, and I'll also minimize the dispute with the person. In other words, I don't have to get into an argument with them about why I answered the way I did. I can just give the right answer and we can move on. So this is a little information about me and kind of my underpinnings that give me such a strong desire to be able to coach people without knowing what's best for them, and also teaching people about that basic ground of being. So in our schools, and I really want you to take a moment and think back to elementary school, to secondary school, to whether you went to a baccalaureate program or undergraduate or graduate school. I want you to think back to school, and I want you to think about that experience of reinforcement and recognition and having to know the answers. And you might even recall a moment when you maybe were punished for not knowing the answers. There's somebody who has an iPhone on, and if you could mute that iPhone, that would be really helpful because there's a little background noise. So just want to encourage muting of phones if you haven't yet. Thank you. So think about it. Where did you go to elementary school? Was there a lot of pressure to have the right answer and get your hand up and to be able to prove that you've done your homework the night before? Did you ever feel that kind of embarrassment or even humiliation when you didn't do your homework and didn't get your hand up and you were called on and you didn't know the answer? I know I certainly did. And it was definitely uncomfortable at those times. So think about tests. Maybe there was a test that you took and that you thought, oh, I studied like crazy for this and I still don't know the answer. Or it's above my head, or it's too much, or I'm surrounded by so many smart kids and I just don't feel like I'm as smart or as motivated or as focused as they are. So a little moment to revisit school and to recall what that experience was like back then. In order to rise to the top of most industries, you pretty much need to know and tell, at least in these professions that are listed here. Nobody wants to go see a doctor who doesn't know anything, and nobody wants to go have an attorney represent them who says, well, I don't know what you should do. And certainly you don't want a building built with an engineer or an architect who say, I have no idea how to build this. So we have a society that is built and reinforced on a daily basis with people who are looked to as experts, authority figures, gurus, etc. And it's one of those things that we have to contend with, because very often people will tell somebody else what to do. I had a client today who was in the United States, and she's a Thai woman, and she wrote in and she said, I had a conversation with my boss who told me I wasn't living up to my potential, that I didn't learn anything in graduate school, that I'm not doing a good job, I'm underperforming, and she went on and on and on. And I said, well, we are surrounded by a lot of people who do know and tell. They know what's best for us, they know what we're doing, and they can absolutely tell us with authority. And I said, maybe part of the challenge that you're in right now is to be able to listen, hear, and not buy into it, and to remember what your experience is. So in pretty much every industry, authorities and experts are pursued. And they're pursued for a variety of different reasons. And it makes a lot of sense that they would be pursued. A lot of sense. So in my experience and in my research, coaching is the only profession, I can't think of any other one. And if you can, maybe you want to share it with us tonight, because that would be illuminating. It's the only profession, I believe, that requires the coach to not know the answers for the client, to not know what they should do, to not know their assumptions or their beliefs, just to not know. And I'm just going to ask this person to please turn on. Okay. So I'm going to define two things for you, because we're going to explore a little bit of a kind of hybrid opportunity. One is called knowing. And knowing are those professions that we discussed before. And showing knowing, or showing your intelligence, demonstrating that, or your particular understanding of subject, your experiences, your expertise, the answers that you know, the solution, the advice that you want to give. That's all in the knowing part. So I recently had my knee surgery on the 1st of July, and I went to my orthopedist, and he knows all about bones, and he's a knee specialist, and he knows, he understands, he has a lot of experience in this area, and he had also advice to give about physical therapy and about the healing process. So I'm very grateful to his knowing and his sharing of what he knows with me. Now, the other definition that we want to look at is to be certain. To be certain means you're sure of something, you're clear, you're positive, you're confident, you don't have any doubts, and you're very, very grounded in what you're certain about. So those two definitions, we're just going to explore a little bit together and see where we go. So a knowing in a certain person. I want to ask you, who might this be? Who might a knowing in a certain person be in your estimation? And I think if you want to raise your hand, you can. And what profession would that be in? That they're knowing and certain. What images come to mind when you think about a profession that's knowing and certain? And you can also hold off until the end as well. But it's an interesting question, knowing and certain. Think about it. Write it down on your pad if you want to. Who is knowing and certain in your experience? Okay, and not knowing and uncertain. In other words, what profession would be a person who is not knowing and uncertain at the same time? Yes, there are a group of people who do not know and are uncertain. Yeah, you can put that down as well. And then we move into the group that is knowing and uncertain. Who might that be, and what profession? What images come to mind? And then we move into, let's see, if I think I missed one here. Not knowing and certain. And what profession would not knowing and certain be? It's a little quiz to see how you're assessing different professions and their need to know or not know, or be certain or uncertain, and what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in that profession in terms of the expectations of your clients, customers, and perhaps audience that you work with. Because there is a very definite sense of expectations that are required in all those different groups. When we get to the dynamics of not knowing versus knowing, and this is where the 4-quadrant model comes up. In other words, in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see not knowing and certain. You'll see not knowing and uncertain in the bottom left quadrant. And in the bottom right-hand quadrant, knowing and certain, and in the upper right quadrant, knowing and uncertain. So you see the way they fit in together. So at the end, we can actually talk about which ones go where. But it's, I think it's an interesting thought to compare. So the traditional mentor model of expert, authority, even guru, is that that's the person looked up to. As a matter of fact, when I was a child, even when my mother took me to the bank, meeting with the banker, they were on an elevated platform. And we would look up to the banker, unless they were very short. We'd look up at them. And always, in church, you look up to the priest because they're elevated. And they're elevated because they're supposed to be higher than you are. And also, of course, you all know in Asian cultures, especially here in Thailand, nobody wants to be above the royal family. You want to look up to them as well. So normal clients are in the position of not knowing and uncertain, and then traditional experts are in the knowing and certain category. So that's a model that's familiar from the past and exists still today in many different situations. The energy dynamic is that the not knowing person is really in the question mark, and the person who knows and tells is the one who is higher and in more of a position of authority. In the ICF coaching dynamic, it flips it around a bit. We as coaches, as you all very well know, we, like in the circus, we jump on the plank that claims that we don't know, but we're very certain about ourselves, and we're certain that we don't know, and we're comfortable in that not knowing. And by jumping on that plank, we actually allow the client to move into the zone called knowing, certain, clear, and focused. It's part of the dynamic that happens in a coaching session between the coach and the client that allows the relationship to happen with such a magical dynamic, so that the answers do actually pop up for the client. But if you're vacillating on that plank and you're moving between consultant and coach or mentor and coach, it can throw a wrinkle into the relationship so that the actual client will turn to you and say, well, what do you think? What's your point of view? What do you think I should do? Which is very tempting in a lot of ways, especially if you like giving advice and you like being in the position of authority. It can be very tempting. And I know some of us in the years gone by liked that position as consultant or in a variety of different roles along the way. So it's us claiming our right to be very certain that we don't know and to be comfortable in that role. Now, in your travels and in your work experience, have you come across someone who just seemed to know the answers about every subject? They knew about chemistry or physics or animal husbandry or raising babies. They knew about carpentry. They knew about wine tasting. They just knew the answers about every subject. I think we've all maybe known one or two of those along the way. And I want you to remind yourself, how did you feel being around that person? Did you feel eager to learn from them? Did you feel enthusiastic? Or did you feel maybe a little bit like there wasn't room for your opinion, point of view, experience, knowledge? Or maybe you felt that they wanted to hear themselves and their own knowingness rather than listen to what you had to say. So I would say this to us if we were doing exercises, but if you could, just by yourself, wherever you are, recall a session somewhere in your professional coaching life, anytime, when you actually knew what the client should do. It may have been a very long time, and you may have to go back decades to actually recall a time when you knew what a client should do. And that's what I want you to recall at this moment. You know, what did you say? What did you do? And what happened? There have been times in my life when, I'll tell you one, it's kind of a double negative, but years ago when I was doing an offsite project for the telephone company in America, and my client said, I want to try that questioning approach that you do with people, and I want to do it with my team. And I want to do an offsite, 3-day offsite with my team, and I want to see how it's going to work. And I said, great. We did all the planning and organizing and structuring it. And the night before, we're at the resort in California. And he walks in with this huge foam core board with Post-its all over it. And I said, what's that? And he looked at me and he said, this? Well, it's kind of a fallback plan in case they don't come up with those answers. Then, we have something to do for 3 days, because I'm a little nervous that we may not have anything to do if we don't have a plan. And I looked at him and I said, this is knowing. I said, I don't think so. He said, what do you mean you don't think so? And I said, if you want to do that, you can do that, but I'm going to go home and you can conduct the offsite without me. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, you said you wanted to explore the questioning approach and letting your people come up with their own answers. He said, well, yeah, I do. I still do. And I said, it's either or. It can't be both. You can't straddle both sides of the plank. You either are going to give up knowing and you're going to let them know, or you're going to be the brilliant guy that you've been since I've known you, and you're going to come in with all the answers, and they're going to sit there, listen to you, and do exactly what you want to have done, and they will not come up with the answers because you already did. He looked at me and he was really upset. He said, what do you want me to do with it? I said, I want you to put it in the trunk of your car. He said, the trunk of my car? I said, absolutely. He said, well, I really worked hard on this. And I said, you have a choice. Either that goes in the trunk or I leave and go home. Either or. Doesn't matter to me. You can do it however you want. So he reluctantly put it in the trunk of his car. He was really nervous about the whole process. I said, do you trust me? He said, I do. I said, good, then let me handle it. Now, in those 3 days, we used the coaching approach in team coaching, and we got some really brilliant ideas from his team. Really creative, insightful, wonderful, enthusiastic, eager, innovative solutions that he actually came up to me and said, I didn't come up with such great answers as they did. And I'm almost embarrassed to tell you, but their answers are better than mine ever were. So I'm sorry I doubted you. And thank you for urging me to put the board in the trunk of my car. So in that moment, I really knew what was best for him and his team. But what was best was for all of us to enter the void of not knowing together. And it's what I felt was going to be the only thing that was going to work for all of us. So think about one of those moments when you knew what was best. Maybe you were right. Maybe you weren't. Maybe your client became dependent on you. I don't know. We'll explore that when we talk together. We have to look at what gets in the way. And what gets in the way of not knowing and claiming the right to not know, number one, is ego. I mean, we all like to look good and sound smart and be the one who's looked to as the one who knows. And for people to go, oh, that was great. Oh, how brilliant. Oh, how insightful. Oh, you're so smart. I mean, I think all of us like being right. I don't know anybody who really looks forward to being wrong. And so that ego part of us really likes people looking to us or looking up to us for the answers and for the guidance and direction. And another thing that gets in the way is fear. You know, for me, I can think back to school and those memories that I asked you to look at before of elementary school and secondary school. You know, I can even remember some of those memories now of being afraid of, saying the wrong answer and having everybody laugh at me. And sometimes I did, and sometimes they laughed at me. I was funny as a child, but sometimes I gave stupid answers, and it was embarrassing giving stupid answers. So maybe being wrong is another thing that gets in the way. Another thing might be personal agendas. Having an agenda that might be wanting other people to like me because I'm so smart, or like me because I'm so experienced, or like me because I'm a knower. And I can actually cut through all that confusion, doubt, uncertainty, and fear, and I can tell you spot on what's going on. That's kind of cool. I remember trainings that I was in and years ago when the trainer would really know what was going on with the person and tell them, and the person would say, "Ah, how did you know?" As if they were psychic. Pretty impressive. So it's another thing that can get in the way of wanting to impress other people and wanting them to think you're really cool. So when we know the answers for another person, for our clients, for a student, for someone that we are developing, it really creates a dynamic of knower and seeker, or teacher and student, mentor and mentee, however you want to call it. It's the knower and the one who doesn't know. And it can inhibit that person's ability to discover and to learn their own inner knowing, their own answers, their own truth, especially if you're the one who demonstrates the fact that you do know and you can tell and you like being in that position. Then it might just infantilize the client, and they might move into that position of just tell me what you think, tell me your ideas, tell me what I should do. And I can imagine that all of us have probably been in that position at some time or another, when our clients were just practically begging us to tell them what we think or what they should do. And as I mentioned before, it is tempting at times to want to know and to want to tell. So in the area of self-development, we start looking at the ego self versus the authentic self. And if you look at the ego self, it's an unstable model moving from arrogance to insecurity. And it can flip back and forth between, I'm so arrogant and I know everything, to I'm so insecure that I have to actually know everything. That's why I go back to arrogance, because I don't want anybody to see my insecurities. And if you look at the authentic self, which is more of a stable self-concept, because it can range between confidence and humility. And actually, as coaches, what we're seeking is that balance between confidence and humility, where we can move and dance gracefully between those two polarities without having to go into that ego expression of arrogance and insecurity. So making the shift. And this is something that I want all of us to think about the best way to be able to encourage that shift, whether it's the shift in ourselves or the shift in our students or the shift in our clients. Making the shift in our clients and being able to know, and in our students and being able to shift from knowing to not knowing. Because it is a definite mindset. And it's really a fundamental requirement to really being a brilliant coach. So I'm going to go over some tools and techniques. And you may already have them. You may already do them. And if you do, congratulations. And if you don't, you can definitely have everything that you see here and more. So one of the things that I encourage my students to do is that before a session, if they're feeling particularly arrogant and knowing and wanting to prove that they're such a good coach, to download onto a pad any of their need-to-know agendas. And it might have to do with ego, it might have to do with fear, it might have to do with being right or looking good or being liked. But to download any of that ego need onto a pad that definitely you can have back after the session. Tell the pad that all the good ideas and solutions are going to be there, and you're going to relinquish that need during this process. And definitely let yourself know that you have permission for the next hour, 45 minutes, however long your sessions are, to not know the answers for your client. No matter how much they beg you to know those answers, you have the permission to not know. Now, it's a really great idea, if you keep a journal, to have a list of times in your sessions when you did not know. And the session was fabulous, brilliant, beyond your expectations, that it really delighted and surprised you. And you actually keep a running list of those sessions that remind you about not knowing and how it created such extraordinary results. And those reminders can help you reinforce that reality of not knowing if you tend to vacillate back and forth. So keeping that list of validating the not knowing mindset can also really help. Now, there are some humbling mantras that I advocate, and I think that they're really helpful for us to remember. You can make up your own, of course, but these are just to maybe encourage you to have your own, whatever it is, and maybe it's something that you say before your sessions, or maybe it's a screensaver or a sign that you have in your coaching corner. I'm here to help, not to know. My beingness is more important than my doingness. My presence is more valuable than knowing answers. Or you could say, my presence is my present, not my knowingness. Empowering others is more important than my ego. Not knowing for others is the key to my success. Just little examples of little kind of mantras that you can recall to remind yourself, if you tend to vacillate, that's right, I'm here to not know. Now, I actually made up a prayer that you can have if you want it, if you want to use it, any part of it, or cut it down. Some people like to use an amended version. And if you want to just close your eyes for the moment, I'll read it to you. And you can take 3 deep breaths, and you can allow yourself to just listen, because I'll say it to you. It's called the Coaching Angel Prayer. Coaching angels, help me become a vessel of your guidance. Where there is confusion, let me enable clarity. Where there is doubt, let me provide hope. Where there is uncertainty, let me create certainty. Where there is fear, help me to instill trust. Where there is darkness, let me shine the light. Where there is sadness, let me open the door of joy. Where there is helplessness and hopelessness, let me illuminate possibility. Where there is resentment, let me extend compassion. Where there is anger, let me provide understanding. Where there is guilt, help me provide forgiveness. Where there is pain, let me provide relief. Where there is worry, let me provide peace. Where there is regret, let me engender acceptance. Where there is loneliness, let me provide support. Where there's loss, let me open the window to blessings. Where there is conflict, help me to create harmony. Save me from having to know the answers, and help me to facilitate illumination in all challenges. Help me release my ego and cause others to be brilliant. Let me be fully present in the moment, opening the door of possibility for others to see, to know, and to do what's required to grow. Let me be your vessel of empowerment. Now, it's time for us to be able to have some questions and to be able to have some discussion about the art of not knowing. So, Shirley, will you help me with determining who has a question, who wants to raise their hand, or maybe I should do that. I'm not sure. I think it's you, Shirley.
Yeah, I'm just going to have a look and see.
Okay.
I'm going to unmute everyone. And who would like to ask the first question? I might mute people back again. Anyone got that? I just
Should we ask people to raise their hand? That little thing where they raise their hands?
it's not coming up on my screen.
Okay, it's on my screen.
Can you do then?
Okay. So who wants to ask a question, share something about those different professions or about your experience in elementary, secondary, or graduate school or any time in your educational history or your experience of moving from not knowing to knowing?
Hello, I'm Sabrina.
Hi, Sabrina.
It was a very good time for me to remind of myself as a coach. Actually, I have been coaching 11 years.
Great.
I found that many leaders want sometimes answers from me. And then sometimes I also gave some advice, and they really liked that. And they got a lot of insight from my answers sometimes. I didn't do them many, many times, but I also did. And I have a question. Have you ever given advice or not at all? If you did, how did you do? Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Sabrina. It's a great question. Shirley, I want to suggest that you mute yourself because that loud noise is coming again in the background. Sabrina, I'll tell you what I do. When people say to me, what do you advise me to do? Usually what I say to them is I say, I can give you my advice, but I don't know that my advice would be actually great for you. I can share my experience with you, and I'd rather do that after we explore what your value system is, what your preferences are, and what's important to you about this. Is that okay? And so I kind of tuck it to later, and then I will encourage them to be able to explore what's important to them. And then later on I can say, if I were in your position and when I've been in your position, I have done X, Y, Z because these were my preferences or my value system or my what was important to me at that moment. But I usually do it after I hear from them, and I share it as my own, not necessarily that I'm advising them to do it because I think it's right for them, but because it's what I did for me, which could be different than what they're doing for them. Great, thanks. Thanks for the comment, it's great. And it does happen a lot with people who say, tell me what you think. Okay, who else would like to share or ask a question?
Can I have one more if there is
Sure.
nobody?
Please.
Can you hear me? Hello, I'm Lydia.
Lydia. Okay, Lydia.
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Sorry?
Perfect, audible.
Okay, you can hear me. All right.
Okay.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for the beautiful Coach Angel prayer. It's really very inspiring. And also thank you for this refreshing reminder. Why I say this is because I started my career as a consultant, all right, as a management consultant. And consultant basically gives advice. The client looks forward to a consultant always for answers. So when I became a coach, I have to go the other end of the scale of not knowing, like you say, because we are supposed to evoke answers and not to give answers. So when I'm coaching, I'm now also a consultant as well as a coach. So I have to keep reminding myself that I'm wearing the hat of a coach. I must not give advice. I must evoke answers rather than give advice. So the balancing act has always been quite difficult for me in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I always remind myself, be mindful about it. So your presentation is really a very refreshing reminder of what a coach should really be. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And, one of the things that I do when I am in a capacity as a consultant, because I did get my PhD in organizational development, so I am a consultant as well and have been for a long time. I'll ask my client, today, would you like me in the role of coach or consultant? Because I think we should choose before we proceed too far. And then we'll determine what that role is and clarify it. Because sometimes they really want me to be a consultant and sometimes they really want me to be a coach. And if I know what role it is, I can put the proverbial hat on for that day that's appropriate to that client in that situation. And then I can keep the boundary clear and not cross over. Thank you, Lydia. Lovely to hear from you. Yes, hi, I see a hand. Go for it. Now, I can't hear you. We have to unmute you. Can you unmute yourself? You have to click the unmute button.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now. What's your name?
Yeah. Hi, this is Yuka speaking. I
Hi,
am
Yuka.
Hi. Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very informative and it's also profound, and I learned quite a lot during the short time. And I'm working as a consultant in a training company. And I have seen many leaders who are making distance from his team members because he somehow subconsciously has knowing everything's behavior.
Yeah.
What could be your advice for me to let him aware that he has this, he has this knowing everything behavior. That's the reason that he's creating distance from the people that the people who wants to follow him.
It's a great question. Number one, has he ever done a 360 feedback with his people?
No.
Might be something that he might want to consider, especially with people who are willing to, usually the 360 is anonymous, and that's what's really helpful is people can be honest and they can say, and he can actually ask some specific questions. You might be the person to conduct the 360 and to be able to gather the data and synthesize it and to be able to give him the feedback if he's open to it. So it's a nice way for him to be able to solicit feedback in an anonymous way from the people who need to give it and to the person who needs to hear it, with a neutral person acting as a facilitator colleague, eliciting the feedback. So it might be a bridge building for you with him to be able to have him hear exactly what he needs to hear from them.
Thank you so much.
You're totally welcome. Thank you, Yuka.
Thank you.
Someone else have a comment or a question or a share?
Cherie, I've got a question. It's Shirley.
Hi, Shirley.
What do you do if you have a senior manager who doesn't want to take the 360 and who persist in their knowing all the time? What do you do as a coach?
Does it show up in that person's leadership in terms of the people that he or she is leading and the people being demotivated?
Mm. Mm.
See, one of the things that you can do also, depending upon your relationship with the leader, and I've done this, and it's been pretty effective, is that I remember a specific project in Des Moines, Iowa, with a guy who was one of the most arrogant, knowing, telling bosses. He was a very polished professional and pretty much the best in his field, and he knew it. But nobody wanted to work for him because everybody felt really dwarfed by him, and they didn't feel like he could develop them and they could grow under him. They just felt humiliated, embarrassed, and small. And so there's that noise again. Anyway, they gave us, we did a little audit, a morale audit with his team. It wasn't exactly a 360, but we just asked people 5 simple questions. What's working? What could improve? What would be your desired outcomes for this project? What are your suggestions and good ideas? And what are your concerns and worries? 5 simple questions. And then we queried the people who the leader actually said, these are the people who I think have opinions that are worth listening to, and they're kind of barometric in the process. So we queried those people and synthesized their answers anonymously, and then sat down with him and fed him back the information. And when he saw his name over and over again as the cause of the problems, he was really taken aback, because he had never, ever imagined that many people thought that he was the cause of so many problems. And it was an eye-opener and a game changer. And then he said to us, "Can you help me change?" And we said, "Well, if you have the desire, the willingness, the belief, and the commitment, yes, we can. But it's going to take some work and some time. It's not an overnight deal. It's not a wave of a wand." And he said, "Well, this makes it pretty clear that I need to change." And so we started shadowing him. And shadowing him meant going to meetings and being literally a fly on the wall, taking notes, documenting, sometimes recording the meeting with his permission, and then later meeting with him privately. How did you think you did in that meeting? How do you think people responded to you? Using the coaching approach and actually either looking at the videotape or listening to the audio tape, and then saying, what could you have done here differently? What could you have done to empower your people? What could you have done that might have created a different atmosphere that would have invited more participation? Well, I'm telling you, the entire project lasted, I think it was a total of 18 months from beginning to end. It was not a shorty. But this man came away saying, "I've learned so much. I've learned not only to be a better leader, I've learned to be a better husband, and I've learned to be a better father. But most of all, I think I've learned to be a better human being."
Wow.
And that was one of the great experiences of having somebody look in the proverbial mirror of how they were behaving and really making a choice to change, and being there in the most supportive coach role, holding their hand down this very uncomfortable trail.
Thank you.
Great question. Thank you, Shirley.
Any other questions?
Cherie.
Hi, Cherie.
Hi.
Hi, Julius here.
Hi, Julius.
Yes, thank you for your wonderful presentation. This is also very refreshing to me. I got my formal training in 1999, and I started coaching in 2000, but I would say that not knowing is really the most challenging part. I can stop myself from telling, but what I find really very challenging is when a client actually shares something that I can so relate with, automatically my brain would scan itself and look for, those past experiences, and, look for some.
Yep. Having trouble hearing you, Julius, right now. But I think I get the gist of it. So I think you're having a little bandwidth problem, Julius. So I'll just pop in here and tell you what I would do in that situation. I would see this person in the mirror like you are and seeing that reflection in him that's you and him. And then I would make a note to self. And my note to self would be, there's a boundary here. And my story is my story, and his story is his story. And my job here is to help him evolve his story, his knowingness, and his outcome, which could very well be different from mine, even though there's such a similarity. And so it's declaring the boundary between me and him and me, and making certain that I don't project onto him everything that's both the similarities and the resolution, because his outcome could be very different from my outcome. So it's just a thought to be able to toss to you, which is note to self about the boundary management. Anyone else before we complete in a few minutes?
Cherie, this is Narayanan from India.
Hi.
Hi.
Narayanan.
First of all, thank you very much on this topic. This is something which is very close to my heart. So can I say it's just like what they say in Zen, which is a no-mind situation in a coaching conversation?
You can. But the thing that's a little bit confusing is that in beginner's mind, in the Zen beginner's mind, it's an openness like a child where you don't know, but in the coaching conversation, we have to be very certain of our capacity to ask those powerful questions. And in beginner's mind, in Zen, I'm not totally clear that that level of certainty is required for beginner's mind. So I'm not certain that that's a complete analogy, but I think that definitely it's partially there, because it's that blending of the not knowing with the certainty that makes it that interesting combination that's different. Because it's that groundedness, that certainty about who we are and that we can do this and that this process works. Because if you move into not knowing and uncertain, it doesn't work. You have to really be grounded and not knowing at the same time. So it seems to a lot of people like a paradox. But in fact, it's the magical formula of going into the void together with the person with your flashlight lit.
I have just an add-on question, which is somewhat related to what Shirley asked, about when a person says that he doesn't know, he or she is surprised about when the results come out from, say, a 360, saying that you are the reason, and when they show the surprise, is it that they are not aware of it, or is it that they are hiding their awareness?
Oh, it could be either one. It just depends on the individual. But very often, remember, our role as coaches is to heighten the client's awareness about what they're doing that they're unconscious of. Because they have adopted certain behaviors, attitudes, and ways of being that got them to where they are. But as the expression goes, what got them here won't get them there. So we're catching them midstream with a lot of behaviors, attitudes, and mindsets that were very effective in the past, but may not be effective going towards the future. And so as coaches, our role is to help them discover what they're doing now that may not help them in their future, but might have been helpful in their past. And so part of our role is to help them transition, transform, move on, let go, do it with their eyes open, make choices that are conscious and deliberate and intentional, rather than operate from the knee-jerk response from automatic behavior of what did get them to where they are now.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Cherie. And I think we're probably at the very end now. And I would just like to say thank you so much for a really inspiring and wonderful talk that I think has challenged a number of us. And for me, the big takeaway, the really important one for me, was that going into the void, and the other of their story is their story and mine is mine, and the boundary that's there, and don't project. And that to me was the really powerful takeaway for me. So I would like to thank you very, very much for a wonderful talk, and say good night to everybody. And yes, and Catherine saying thank you to everybody. And so everyone's, I think, thoroughly enjoyed the evening. And Julius said to tell you he was sorry he got disconnected again. Obviously, the Philippines has got worse IT than Australia. So.
Okay, well, thank you all for tuning in, and lovely to meet you tonight. Hope to see you in the future sometime.
Thank you very, very much. Good night, everybody.
Thank
And
you,
if you
Cherie.
want your CCUs, send me the text message with your full name. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.